Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to be a part of our presentation. So today we'll be presenting on Esperanza, Hope, as a culture of health equity. And really what we're going to be talking about is the creation of this innovative community university partnership for Spanish-speaking community engaged psychology training and what Esperanza is all about. My name is Dr. Alyssa Ramírez Stege. I'm a clinical assistant professor in counseling psychology, and I'll have all of my colleagues and students present themselves as we move in through the presentation for today. If you're very curious, which I hope you are by the end of today, about what we are doing as part of Esperanza and Centro Spano at UW-Madison as well, please go to our website. It's esperanza.wisc.edu. You can contact us through there, or we'll be leaving out some business cards too for people to connect with us. Oh yeah, I have the chat here too. Great. The chat looks like it's disabled.
Right.
So I don't know how to change that.
Okay.
All right, thank you. All right. So just briefly, what we're going to be talking about today, we'll first start off with a little brief introduction about Centro Spano and the inception of Esperanza, how this started. Then I'll be talking about what is Esperanza at the UW side, the Bilingual Psychological Services Certificate. Then we'll get a more student perspective on what it's like to do some of this responding to community and academic needs. And then our colleagues are going to talk about an example of this community university partnership through the Momentos Esperanza podcast. And then we'll finish up talking about Esperanza sustainability, some of the lessons learned and challenges that we continue to face in this partnership. So, no worries. Okay. All right, so I'll pass it along to my colleague, Evelyn Cruz.
Buenos dias. My name is Evelyn Cruz. I'm the Director for Program Planning and Evaluation at Centro Spano. And I will share a little bit about who we are at Centro Spano. And then I will also share a little bit about what motivated us to do this collaboration, this community academic partnership. So are you all familiar with Centro Spano?
Awesome.
Well, so what has been your initial experience with Centris Panel? Go ahead.
Working with ESL, also being help with the socialized program.
Muy bien. So very good. So I'm gonna close this. I'm not left-handed somehow. Okay. So Centris Panel, we have a three-pronged mission: empowering community, strengthening family, and engaging with community. And that is how the central programming is organized. What is this one? Yeah. So, and someone mentioned that you've had experience working or connecting with Centris Panel before, and some of you have in the past. So Centro Spano is there to support the larger community, and very specifically the Latine community. And awesome. So Centro grounds the work that we do in our values of fostering connection, acting with mutual respect and dignity, nourishing community, living with courage, and demonstrating integrity. So this really is sort of the floor for that holds the programming in the partnerships at Centro Spano. The agency serves about 4,000 families and about 6,500 individuals through the programs and services each year. These are some of the programs that or some of the services that we provide. So in the realm of supporting families, we do a lot of case management. So we do referrals for mental health. We work on social capital. We do needs assessment. We're actually looking at, in addition to doing needs assessment, do also assessments of strengths in the community. And you might hear a little bit of that in the future. Support and advocate financial needs, housing. We have legal clinics, general questions, systems navigation, immigration services, health, AODA support, employment, healing, and community engagement. So this is some of the work around supporting adults or supporting families. Another of our programs works very specifically with workforce and employment. And around that, we have $15 an hour employment opportunities that are really, we work with job resume, readiness, job readiness skills. We have 4 Caminos programs, CNA, financial, Caminos Progreso, and I'm forgetting another one. Tech, thank you. Thank you. So we have these Caminos or pathways, employment pathways program, and they are really intended to support career growth, professional development, sustainability and stability, wealth building and well-being, and support and advocacy also as part of all of our programming. Our work centers really around youth opportunities, youth programs. We have Juventud, we have Escalera for high schoolers, and then we have college transition program Avanzando. So at the center of the youth programming, there's really supporting that connection to our culture, roots and identity, youth voice, career and college support, experiential learning, belonging, advocacy, leadership, and creativity. So these are some of the skills and some of the ways that we support our youth. If you notice a theme around the kinds of support and skills that we do in our programming, they're really around the social determinants of health. I'm sorry, I don't have enough coffee in me today, apparently. So the social determinants of health. I'm thinking development, social determinants of health. I've only spent over 17 years in public health. So in this, you can also see around this graph where Centros, the agencies at the center, youth, workforce, and family. So this ecological approach to our work is very public health center also. And this is pretty much what I shared with you, some of the ways that we, some of the programming around the youth supports and the community supports for programming. My last plug is also that Centro is currently in the middle of a campaign for a new building. This symbol is Cali, which means home. And we are hopefully by the end of this year or early next year, we'll be at our new home in Park Street. So some of the motivators for the Esperanza partnership. This partnership was sort of envisioned in 2019, but the needs had been building up for a long time. So some of the ways that we thought about the program had to do with what was happening in Wisconsin and in the nation around that time. Injustices around family separation, children in cages, vigilantism, public policy. If you remember 2016, 2017, we also had a lot of enforcement, ICE enforcement too. So across the board, we have workforce shortage. So we really wanted to address the systemic or structural issue around workforce. There's about 1 bilingual psychologist for every 4,500 Spanish-speaking residents in the US. Workforce limitations around providing class, cultural, linguistic appropriate services. So that's also a huge limitation because the language preference of the patient or client or community person coming for services is really not what is center, is really the language of the provider. Oppression was another one of the motivators for Esperanza. Mental health treatment is verbal, and when you need an interpreter in the process, it really complicates issues. So a lost opportunity at UW. You are training people in English to serve a Spanish-speaking community. And then the assimilation pressure that Latinx university students receive in a predominantly white and English speaking in base context in order for them to turn around and support the Latino community. So I wanted to show some of the headlines of what was happening and during the time that we were envisioning, and Esperanza at this point was more a need than was than really the project that it is today. We had not really started to envision it until 2019, but this was happening around after 2016, if you remember, really after the last presidential election of 2016. This is also what was happening in Wisconsin. We were having ICE race enforcements. We were receiving at Centro also some of the people that were being impacted, the community people that were being impacted. At the time that this was happening, I was the deputy director of the agency since 2017. And we would see some of our community members coming through the doors. It was, the pain was very palpable. The sadness, the children in families that were being separated in this process. And we were really realizing that there was a need for supporting the community shortly after, because we also, because of our funding, we had to do reporting. Shortly after, we started seeing more referrals for mental health needs, more bullying issues in the schools. And so as community members, we were really trying to figure out what is the ability of Centro to support the community in a way that it is not currently happening. So this is really Esperanza. And I won't spend a lot of time on this. These are mostly like the headlines and some of the quotes about what was happening at the time. What I do want to talk about is a lot of the people that we serve at Centro, and a huge part of our work at Centro around cultural grounding has to do with our immigrant community. So I wanted to highlight some of the griefs of immigration. And so this is kind of centering why Esperanza was needed. So the family separation or dynamics, the change in language that doesn't allow you to really express yourself. And language, emotions is really conveyed through language. And so it's kind of difficult to convey your emotions and when you're speaking a different language. Our ability to like really ground ourselves in culture, in spiritual practice, those are things that change with the immigration process. The land is different. There's a lot of significance in the places that you're coming from, and there's a lot of emotion and connection to land. When people leave, oftentimes they're also leaving their social status to come here. Oftentimes immigrants are not coming because they really want to. They're coming because there's a either political, financial, or other situation that really requires them to come here. And so their professional growth, access to their other opportunities that they would have had back at home are changed. And when they come here, there's discrimination and racism that we encounter differently, not that we don't, but that we encounter differently in our places of origin. Danger against physical and emotional integrity, and including part of the work conditions and the immigration process. And so perhaps for some of the danger in the crossing, or sometimes even here. So if you remember, not very long ago, we were also, in addition to the COVID crisis, we were in the middle of a racism crisis. And it really felt emotionally as well as physically unsafe too. And then the financial instability that the immigration policies bring. So I wanted to highlight that because these are very centered to, the immigration is very centered to the work of Esperanza. In the middle of the COVID and racism crisis, I really had to like understand what I myself was going through in that process. And I ended up looking at grief as in adapting the stages of grief to what I was feeling and how I was envisioning life. So this is my adaptation. And a quote that really reminds me of what we are. I'm really on time here. This is my last slide. So we are in the grieving process. To me, it felt that struggle to be fully human and to see others as fully human. Because I think that that is really part of the work, not allowing the hurt that we are experiencing to really color the way that we respond to others. So this quote from Candy was really important for me. And as I was trying to understand what I was going through that process, then I really envisioned that the healing from oppression is like experiencing the shock and denial of what the dehumanization process really means, working through that pain and that guilt, regardless of whether you are part of the population that is feeling the oppression or the population that is doing the oppression, right? And I say population because it's not necessarily at an individual level, it's really a collective issue. And then anger and bargaining, the reconstruction and working through, and then healing and hope. And then for me, the work of Esperanza really centers in the healing and hope space. And so I want to pass this on to my partner at UW, Alyssa.
Thank you. And we're hopeful to also have some time at the end too for Q&A for both the folks who are in here and also for the folks in the Zoom meeting. So once we had all of these pieces happening and all the wonderful work happening at Centris Panel, that's when Esperanza kind of grew. And the two main goals of Esperanza was one, to strengthen our family-centered community programming that was already addressing the social determinants of health, and two, which is the main part of our partnership at the UW-Madison, is to increase access to culturally appropriate mental health services with training and intervention. And so this is part of a broader vision of a Latina community that is centered in dignity, health, well-being, agency, visibility, empowerment, respect, and pride. So this innovative justice-oriented community university, what does this look like and how it started? On the Centris Spano side, we really focus on mental health literacy, Latina leadership development, mental well-being of community staff. So over 2 years, we've been working with Centris Panel staff, and one of our Esperanza students is now developing as her dissertation project, Dania Soto, is developing a curriculum for Latina community staff wellness. We do evaluation of the community services and programming that we already do, and Gabriella is going to talk a little bit about that as well. We do advocacy for Latina communities, so shout out at Fernando here, who's also part of the Latino Mental Health Coalition that both Evelyn and I are part of. So how do we advocate for systems-based changes at the Dane County and local community levels, and generally building bridges across the Madison community. On the UW side, we're really focused on recruiting and training Spanish-speaking graduate students in any clinically based program. We really want these students to be able to provide linguistically, culturally, and situationally appropriate services in Madison and Dane County through an interdisciplinary approach. So you all have been hearing about this not only psychology-based approach, but a public health, community-engaged approach that is rooted in decolonization frameworks and developing research and innovation that actually comes from the community that's serving our Latina community. So who are we trying to recruit? I said anyone who's in any UW-Madison graduate student in a clinically based program. So these include, and they have started within our counseling psychology program, and it includes all the psychology programs within our School of Education. So that's counseling, school, and rehabilitation, but also clinical psychology, social work. We are also trying to recruit folks in medicine who would also, I think, benefit from this type of training, nursing, family medicine, and even perhaps people in the intersection of some of this clinically based, kind of like thinking about this in an expansive way. We're also open for some students to take some of the courses if they are not able to take the whole certificate. So as part of this training, graduate students can expect to build knowledge in what is liberation psychology that is Latina-centered, anti-racist and decolonization frameworks that promote radical healing, to develop some of their outreach and advocacy skills through the local partnerships that we have, and to engage in culturally and linguistically affirming programming that promotes also their personal and professional wellness and capacity to thrive. So one of the things that Reverend Judge Everett Mitchell was talking about is retention, right? We are recruiting students, but how do we retain them in a way that they are well by the end of their graduate studies and they're not burned out and able to come back to our communities and continue to serve our communities in ways that they can thrive as well, professionally and personally. So what this looks like in practice, our Esperanza courses span 1.5 years of practice. We do all our admissions during the fall. So the fall, I really try to work in doing talks and getting students to understand what Esperanza is about and to be interested in applying. The first year of our program is really focused on the foundational philosophical, theoretical, and clinical skills that students need. So the first course, CP 500, is really the philosophy of liberation psychology, really thinking about what does radical healing look like? What does that look like for me as a person? It's very self-reflective practice so that students can then think about extending that into the work that they're doing. Then we have the 2 3-credit courses during the summer that are kind of like the heaviest load for all of our students. The Dimensions of Latino Mental Health is the theoretical foundations in Latina psychology. And we do part of that work at Centris Panel. So we're also having students engage with the Centris Panel folks. And then we have a clinical skills in Spanish course. That's the Strengthening Latinas lab. And then the second year of the program, that's why we ask students to be in clinically based programs, is with the understanding that they're going to be applying to and trying to get into one of the community-based clinical programs, internships, clinical practicums across the Madison, Dane County, or even in Milwaukee or other rural areas in Wisconsin, where they are practicing their skills in Spanish. We ask that they're doing this 25% of the time, so we're very flexible, also recognizing that our Latina communities also use Spanish and English very flexibly as well. So that's the clinical supervision courses for the second year. So really what we're trying to do is promote transformative and radical healing that's characterized by critical consciousness and active resistance, really having accountability and having power that is shared with our communities, focused on empowerment, radical hope, envisioning possibilities that is multi-systemic so that we're actually repairing relationships within our communities, and that it's promoting cultural equity, authenticity and self-knowledge, and cultural humility. So really the goals of this training are resistance, self-determination for ourselves as clinicians, for the communities that we're working with, liberation, resilience, and a lot of our indigenous abuelos, our ancestors and folks are talking about re-existence, like really envisioning completely radical and different, joyous ways that we could be thinking about our realities. This is our wonderful inaugural cohort. You can also find all of their information on our website. So you'll see that we span right now across the School of Education Psychology programs. Please whip out your phones because we're going to have a lot more QR codes too, and I'll put some of these at the end as well. But I just love sharing some of this work from our students. So this was the final in the first course that they took on what does radical healing look like for you. And it's beautiful projects from these students. So please look at those. Those are amazing. Also on our website. There will be more QR codes and I'll put this up at the end. So we could talk about each one of these projects for probably an hour. A lot of what we're trying to do too in this re-existence is reconnecting with ancestral wisdom And so we also have a Healing Ethno-Racial Trauma Heart Santuario, which are monthly workshops and talking circles or círculos de palabra, where we're integrating ancestral wisdom with Latin American Indigenous elders. We also have a mentoring program that I supervise. Natalie's here too. She has she's part of the Momentos Esperanza podcast, but also we have really interesting research projects that our students are doing that are part of building this mutually beneficial community university partnership. So with that, I will actually pass it along to one of our students. So let me just move this around so that it's helpful for everyone. Thank you.
Yes. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Gabriella Gaus Hinojosa. I'm a PhD student in counseling psychology, and I'll be speaking a little bit about what my experiences have been like being a part of this partnership. So as Dr. Ramírez Stege has already kind of emphasized, what we are striving to do is training therapists to do more than therapy. Psychologists, we are trained to intervene at the individual level, at the group level, at the community level. But traditionally, most psychology training programs are teaching us how to do talk therapy, one-on-one interventions, which is fantastic. But when we are getting trained to do consultation work or intervene at the systematic level, that requires a different scope of competencies, a different scopes of training that the psychology field is trying to just get more training and language around. So consultation is defined like through APA as applying and extending the knowledge of a psychologist through consultation to problems that involve human behavior in various areas. And I'll be speaking a little bit about how we're able to do some of that through Esperanza. So as a graduate student in the School of Education, I am one of 4 fellows in a graduate training program in mental health equity, which is training us to disrupt health inequities at different levels through research, consultation, and teaching. And this was a really incredibly unique opportunity, I think, for me to get specialized training on how to do some of this community engaged research work. So my first year in the program, I was able to meet regularly with Evelyn, and together we were able to draft and put some of these values into an MOU and talk about what are some of our non-negotiables in this partnership, what are we envisioning for the partnership. Through the fellowship, I was also able to get connected with the Wisconsin Center for Evaluation Research. I took courses that taught me how to do program development and intervene in that way with Dr. Annalie Good. And I was able to be a part of Raíces de Liderazgo, which is a training program that was developed and adapted by Roots for Change. I know someone in the audience has worked for them, but it's aiming to foster wellness via co-created community-driven activism and civic engagement. And to what Evelyn alluded to earlier in the presentation, when psychological distress is caused by policy, we need to, part of mental health and wellness means talking about leadership, talking about activism, and helping our communities, find the voice and the power and the will to sort of resist against some of these policies. So that was a really beautiful opportunity too. And then through the Esperanza Bilingual Certificate Program, one of our courses, actually, we get supervised and trained by Dr. Ramírez Stege to develop or pitch a community engaged project based on some of the needs that we learned from Centris Panel. And then we're able to implement that if we want. We have the opportunity to do that. So I feel very lucky to be able to work with Centro. They've been leaders in the state at developing Spanish language AODA interventions. And I've been able to do some of that work with Evelyn. Hopefully, fingers crossed, that'll be related to my dissertation. But the main point I'm trying to convey, if you get anything out of my little section, is that learning how to do systematic interventions, consultation work is a specialized skill. It's a skill that requires supervision, resources. I was able to get practice or support around that with a fellowship that is a pilot fellowship. It's not going to happen again. And to the point of retention of many of Latino identifying graduate students, we have multiple marginalized identities where many of us are motivated to come into this field because of experiences we've had healing intergenerationally in our own families and our own communities. So expecting us to maybe do some of this work on our free time feels pretty incongruent with a Wisconsin idea. So I'm gonna let my advisor later, Dr. Steve Quintana, speak a little bit more about sustainability later on. And I'm gonna pass it over to Natalie and Sarah to speak about some of the other work that's happening.
Thanks. I'm actually gonna pass it to Sarah for you. Thank you. So, hi everyone. My name is Sarah Sanchez, and I work for Centris Panel and a partnership with Esperanza. So we wanted to enforce to strengthen this bridge that we have been creating through Esperanza, but with the community. And we wanted to make this connection, but to also make it accessible, to not make it academic. I'm not an academic. I work as a social media coordinator, more in the side of communications with Centro Spano for both the people that we serve and also the public. So we created a podcast. So this is not a surprise for everyone, but we wanted to do it accessible in the sense that we wanted to increase mental health awareness, mental health literacy, but in a very unique way. We wanted to distribute it through social media, so it's available everywhere. We will later have more QR codes coming through Spotify, through all the streaming services that you can imagine. So we wanted the distribution to be high in order for the reach to be also high, because we know because of the failures of the system, a lot of people may not have direct connection or availability to these services, but we wanted to make it available in the sense of having these rough talks or having these conversations of Momentos de Esperanza, of everything that my co-presenters have talked about, but through a podcast. So we wanted to bridge it with the community in the sense that we wanted it to be crafted by the community for the community. This image is an Árbol de la Vida, a tree of life, and it's crafted in Metepec, in Mexico. And this is something done by local people, and it's you can only get it there. And it's something that we wanted to do similarly, that we wanted to do very unique. So from the community, by the community, and it's not the academia coming to our community and doing their research. It's more we as Centris Panel are in contact with the community, so we know the needs, and we have these conversations with the academia, but from the ground up. So also we wanted to have guests also in our podcast. If you listen to it, you will see how diverse it is, in the sense that it's just not academics coming and saying about their research. It's more about the community coming with the mental health issues that they have, but also combine it with our chats with academics. So it's part of both, part of this connection, part of this bridging that we're trying to make. So these are 3 elements that we may have in our podcast. So it's under the Esperanza Scope that my partners have talked about very beautifully. But we wanted to make it bilingual. When we were crafting podcasts, we were saying like, oh, in Spanish and English, and we were like, both. We are both. That's part of our identity. So in the podcast, I speak my language, like Spanish, because I feel most comfortable with that, because it's part of my identity, and I wanted to embrace that. But also we talk in English. And this was crafted for our community because our community switches languages all the time. So we wanted to make this a reflection of their identity. And also from the Latinx perspective, Why? Because there are lots of things that are very niche to our community. We have multi-layered identity that comes from migrating, that comes from having this, I am not from here and I am not from there. How do I identify myself? That creates struggles and create mental health issues, but also we wanted to create awareness in this and also to tackle in these topics that you may come from a Latinx household, and with that comes a lot of cultural baggage that here we have ropa sucia no se lava en casa, which is like, we don't talk about like the rough stuff at the home, at the Latinx home. We know it's there, but we don't talk about it. And we do want to talk about it. We do want to create space through our podcast and create these connections and have these rough conversations. So this is how we are doing. So our target audience was in North America. So that's like check. But we are listened everywhere. Well, we are listened in some other places, but more specifically, where are we listened is more in Madison and also in Milwaukee. And that's kind of nice. And that's kind of nice to have these data. This is what permitted us to this podcast. This is what permitted us to go beyond maybe Wisconsin. Here we have Mexico City. So maybe some of this problems that we are talking about, or these conversations, are useful somewhere else, and maybe somewhere is my mom listening to me. But I mean, but we've reached far, and we want to continue this, to continue having these tough conversations, and to make space for people coming into the podcast and having these conversations with the academia, being this bridge.
Thank you, Sada. My name is Natalie. I'm a second year PhD student, and so Sada and I co-host the podcast. Like she was saying, the experiences that we're hoping to center and prioritize are mainly the community ones, and so we want people to feel like they're relatable and that they're being seen, and so that involves us also conversating about things that happen to us, but also with our guests and the different levels of expertise that they're bringing into the space. And so some themes that we have found in our most listened to episodes were strength, identity, and community. And so that's informing a lot of the directions that we're hoping to continue to explore, and the areas we're hoping to focus on in further seasons as we continue to create conversation. And so we also are hoping that it feels like a safe and friendly space for everyone that's listening and involved. And part of that is also checking in with the people that we're having guest speak and how it feels to be a part of these conversations, but also being in contact with the community, our audience. And we have had, or one of our guests actually reached out to us after listening to a few episodes. And so that's been kind of cool to see just the different ways that this is impacting locally. And we also want to acknowledge that there are limitations, and this isn't a replacement for therapy, but more like a resource. And we're hoping by talking about this and really emphasizing the public health piece too, that folks will just become more informed about the different things available to them. And so we have a little snippet of our intro.
Maybe put the microphone to the computer. I'm sorry.
Oh, let's see.
Bienvenida a este espacio, en donde hablaremos de salud mental con perspectiva integral, dándole un toque latino, inmigrante en la adelante.
We aren't doctors or licensed therapists, but we are people just like you that have been through moments of frustration, ansiedad, fear, y tristeza. We will talk about the elephant in the room, temas que todo mundo vive pero pocos los discuten.
Por eso nos propusimos formar un espacio bilingüe que dé lugar a la curiosidad y comprometiéndonos siempre a darte información verídica, pero platicadita y hasta con chismecito.
This is a place where multiculturalism can take up space, where you can tell your testimonios de no ser de aquí ni de allá, of adapting to a system that is not our own and finding your place, and to facilitate healing y sanación.
Y este es nuestro objetivo. Iniciar conversaciones, tener momentos de esperanza con el fin de vivir plenamente y crecer. Escúchanos donde quieras, aunque esto va dirigido a nuestra querida comunidad latina en Dane County. We don't speak double, promise.
All right. Huh? Oh, it was the phone. Okay, well, we figured it out.
Well, you'll just have to also go listen to some episodes, which we're available on pretty much any platform. And here you can also look at some of our social media and just different posts that we have highlighting different episodes. We currently have 11 episodes out for season 1. And if you're interested in being a guest or you also know folks that you're connected with that would like to be a part of this, you can also fill out this brief form for us.
Or reach out.
Or reach out to us, yeah. Okay, and maybe we'll show QR codes more later.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll pass it along to Dr. Quintana.
And also I will say again, just a plug for our Esperanza website, is that if you go under the Esperanza website about our team, all of our wonderful team folks are on there, including their contact information. On our homepage, if you scroll to the bottom of it, there's also a link to the Momentos Esperanza podcast.
Good morning, I'm Steve Quintana. I want to talk about the sustainability of the project. You know, it's obviously a very wonderful project, very creative, very productive for it. So it's really critical for it to be able to be sustained beyond the time for the grant that we received for it. And we built in sustainability by design, and I'll talk about training innovations, Wisconsin idea principles, landscape of higher education, which is changing, and then also the population growth. But sustainability by design, you know, obviously this is very much of a team effort, and many of similar initiatives were really led by one director. And then when that director moves on or changes with their career, then all that effort is lost. And so we've really built into this that it's going to be based upon a team, that when one person may cycle out, another one will cycle in for that too. And we're hoping that the sort of culture and the norms of the project are really passed on through the team for it. So and really it's a team effort, and the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So it's been really wonderful to be able to see the creativity that's resulted from pulling together this team that's fairly diverse, and in many ways we're sort of complementary skills in terms of public health, as well as sort of psychological in terms of what's going on within the individual, the feelings and so forth, as well as what's going on in the community, and also how they're integrating families within the larger community and social services part of it. And then clearly we're doing some mentorship and legacy building for it too. So the students here are hoping to take over positions either within our initiative, or our goal is really to send them out and have the sustainability be part of other programs. And if we can do it here in Madison, they can do it in many other places as well. And then it's really an innovative position within UW that the typical tenure track line hasn't sustained it. This kind of project before, and so we're really trying to create a new model that would be able to have it go beyond it and sort of avoid the publish and perish sort of paradigm where it forces people to do much more research. All the academics, maybe if they're applied to begin with, then they gradually become less applied and much more academic as they move along. So we really needed a new model for the leadership and director of training. And then also with sustainability, because it's not just one department. You saw all the different departments, all the mental health services and units that were able to serve those students and do some training within it too. And so there's going to be ebb and flow, as well as the need to have enough heritage Spanish speakers to be able to staff the cohorts for it too. And one program couldn't staff it enough for that too. So we sort of intentionally designed it to be across different programs. The training is really innovative. So I had a vague idea of what it was, and it's been really wonderful to sort of see how this team here has really developed the training and it's been really innovative. And we believe that it's transferable to other linguistic and cultural groups. So what we're hoping to do is develop a model program to be able to pass it on and then be able to then extend it to other communities. As I mentioned, a multidisciplinary focus. It's really nice to have folks that are in social work, rehab psychology, counseling psychology, clinical psychology, and public health in the same room talking about the community. So it's really focused on the community from the different perspectives. And then, the way of training clinical programs is really decolonization, liberatory frameworks. And so again, this has been on the forefront of that. And we see that this passes over to other programs within our unit, within our department. So not affecting not just the Esperanza students, but all the students within counseling psychology. We're hoping within school psychology as well. And then also there's relatively little attention for what's called new growth Latine communities, which we're a part of, but the largest growth within Latinx populations are within these new growth communities too, where we don't have a lot of middle class or upper class sort of folks in the community, that so many people are coming in new, that it's really sort of working class base for it too. And so we really need to cultivate more professionals to be able to staff all the needs that we have. And then community-based partnership has really been critical to this. And so we now have students shifting over from more academic dissertations or abstract dissertations to really community-based dissertations and work that's a part of it too. And so those things just wouldn't happen. And the relevance of those projects wouldn't happen if it wasn't for this partnership. So in many ways, it exemplifies the Wisconsin idea of principles. It's community-based training service. It's a complementary partnership, integrating psychological training, mental health training, as well as public health principles. We have a shared vision and mission, and so it's been really powerful to sort of have the integration of different perspectives within the work that we do, and to be able to inform others in terms of what expertise we may have that they don't have, and then it's really a sharing back and forth of expertise. And it's really been enhancing the university training. Having done this for several years, it's hard to imagine us ever doing it otherwise in terms of not being community-based. And so community-based has really had a huge impact on the training program. And as I say, it's really expanded beyond just the Esperanza project. And then we hope to expand the training to other professionals, maybe to other UW system schools, maybe have a professional certificate for mental health providers who really want to develop some of these skills that they're training for. I want to point out that the landscape, especially for recruiting underrepresented students, is going to change dramatically. As you many know, Supreme Court has really taken an axe to the affirmative action programs. And so then we think we have an alternative model, and that's where we recruit students for their specific cultural and language skills to be able to serve the population. So it's really not ethnicity-based or race-based. It's really skills-based, experience-based for it. And I think we should move in that direction, or we'll be forced to move in that direction. And it's nice to have this foundation that we have to be able to build upon that. And again, serve as a model for others. And I personally believe we need to be recruiting students all along based upon their skills and experiences, as opposed to just to the racial status where the kind of experiences that they've had, but be able to transform that to be able to serve the community. And those experiences are really grist for the mill for them to develop those skills to do so. And the psychology profession is really falling behind in terms of providing bilingual training. The psychology profession has done a lot of work on multiculturalism, focus on race and ethnicity and other forms of culture. But when it comes to language, basically they say if you have a client that doesn't speak your language, refer them out. But as we know, there's not enough Spanish-speaking clinicians. And so I think it's just really a tremendous disservice that the profession has done to allow this to go on to the 2020s, if you will, in terms of not being able to bolster up what the community really needs in terms of bilingual services. And so I really want to challenge training programs nationwide. There's really no reason to bring in bilingual students and then only train them in one language. And so with COVID, we know how to do remote learning and remote supervision. So it would be incumbent upon each program to provide the necessary supervision in the languages that their students speak in order to be able to meet the needs of the broader community. And lastly, there's the population growth. And so national population growth for Latinx populations between 2010 and 2020, 50% of all US population growth was within the Latinx community. And now the Latinx communities are large minority groups in the US. Also the population growth within Wisconsin. And so the Hispanic population from 2000 to 2015 has doubled, and now we're the largest minority community in Wisconsin. And parallel with that is the UW-Madison Hispanic students are more than 80% of the growth of UW minority students from 2010 to 2020. And Hispanic students make up more than 50% of all the minority students. And this growth is going to continue just because of the youth of the community too. So when you think about recruiting new faculty, new students, for every 2 that recruit, 1 may need to be Latinx in order to be able to serve the community and really represent the population as a whole. And the same thing is happening with the School of Education all down the line. So about 50% of the population growth, 50% of the minority populations are really Latinx folks, and this is going to continue within that too. So I think we have final reflections, and I want to turn that over to.
Thank you. Thanks.
See how we recruit the team?
All right. So some final reflections for us before we pass it on to more Q&A. Again, Esperanza is an innovative community university, justice-oriented training and intervention model. So we really are centering principles of mutuality that ground our work: respect, resilience, reciprocity, sustainability. We at the core, I think the whole team, the way that we have envisioned this is we believe in the power of community to heal. And that is the power of psychotherapy and psychologically based healing. And at the same time, we cannot heal without systems change. So that, again, that public health systemic focus. Because we believe so strongly in the power of the community to heal, this also means a huge shift in our community and university relationships, because we believe that when we recenter our community and the communities that we serve, we are all transformed for the better. So we hope that some of these lessons learned can be helpful, not only for Latina populations, but for many historically marginalized communities. When we're talking about liberation psychology, we're also bringing in the liberation of multiple communities of color who have been impacted by colonization, slavery, and neocolonialism that happens still to this day in the United States and across the globe. So our liberation requires us to envision bold and joyous futures that center on our strengths. So now I'm going to open it up to Q&A with the folks on Zoom and the folks here in this room with us. Also a little plug for our 35-minute workshop that will happen later on centering reciprocity and mutuality and best practices for how do we develop some of the relationships that we talked about today.
So let the folks on Zoom know that they can post questions, but it's not an open chat.
Okay. Oh, okay, great. So for the folks on Zoom, you can post questions. It's not an open chat, but you can post questions to the chat, and then I'll read them out and kind of pass along to folks here who may have questions. Yeah, question in the back.
Thank you for that. I really would love to talk to you. I am a doctoral candidate in history and leadership and policy. I work with young parents. When I'm working with young parents, I'm starting to notice, and I focus on college access for the most part. And I'm noticing this as a huge barrier for people getting access to higher education without documentation status. And UW, from what I know, and you all probably know more about this, but I'm starting to recognize there's this huge wall you can't pass you're not a documentation. And are you all noticing that maybe in your work in this like, are you able to get a pipeline for people to have those documentation status and how stuck we are in the country to DACA, things like that. I'm curious to hear reflections on that.
So for the folks on Zoom, I'm just gonna summarize the question. So the question is around how do we create a pipeline into higher education despite some of the systemic kind of barriers like documentation status. that may impede people from coming even into our graduate programs. Do you want to speak to that, Steve?
Sure. So it's really a challenging problem, and it's even exacerbated by some of the legal issues for it. So for example, we really can't keep a written list of all the DACA students, in part because, especially during the Trump administration, we might have been subpoenaed for that information, and they would have a pathway directly to them. So in some ways, we're really hampered by some of the things that are usually available to those that have documentation status. We can accept them, and those students often have really good Spanish comparative language speaking abilities, but also the funding that they can receive is somewhat limited. So they can't receive federal funds. So some of the scholarships that are as part of the federal government are not able to, that are passed on to us, they're not eligible for. So we really have to be creative and to sort of really understand all the challenges that the DACA students experience. And so we're sort of aware of sort of the tip of the iceberg, but just every day, just the sense that they could be taken away and deported without checking with the family members is a form of trauma and ongoing stress that goes on. So I think being able to recruit the DACA students into the programs to be able to serve the community, and then also educate ourselves in terms of what are the limitations and challenges relative to DACA students.
And be clear for people who don't have that.
Yes, and it's the Social Security number that often limits them, and is the wall that you described. Anything you have to report for Social Security is a huge limitation on San Diego. Thanks. Another question? Yes.
So you all spoke to, that you have a lot of diversity, like different programs, community, different places. How did you all go about like building trust with each other?
Yeah, who wants to answer that?
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, so the question is bringing in a diversity of disciplines and also a lot of different origins from their ancestors, and so South America, Central America, growing up in the US and so forth from that too, as well as the public health and psychological perspectives and things like that. So a lot of forms of diversity that we really need to bridge. Who's going to answer that?
I mean, I don't have the answer. I have an answer. I think in some of my initial conversations with Evelyn, I am a product of Madison, like public school, the public educational school system. I went to West High School. I did my undergrad here. And when my family moved here from Ecuador, we were very much in need of some of the services that I'm involved in, developing and creating now, which has been exciting. And I shared a lot of that with Evelyn about some of my personal sort of motivations to be in this work. And Evelyn very kindly was like, you're still an academic in this setting. It doesn't matter like how long you've been living here, like in this place, like you still have so much power. You represent the institution. People are going to respond to you based on your institutional affiliation and the power that you hold. And we need to talk about that. And that's why we had hard, I think, just like challenging conversations about what are some of the non-negotiables, what are things that maybe people assume are going to happen or going to be respected in partnerships that we can't assume, we have to put in writing. And it's been, I mean, that was initially what some of what that was like, but it's been, I think, an ongoing just like relationship. And there's been moments where we are about to publish, like we're talking about publishing something, working on a project together, and then we all decide like, okay, we're not ready to do this yet. We need to slow down and like go back and just like attend to things in our relationship and make that work. And I think that's what helps us do the work that we do, is that we listen to when we need to slow down, and we listen to when we need to have some of those harder conversations. I don't know if anyone else wants to.
Yeah, I would just echo that, like the prioritizing slowing down. I think that is an anti-capitalist and almost anti-academia way of doing things because we're pushed so much towards productivity. And in the moments that we haven't done that, we've also noticed that it feels really terrible. And then we have conversations about how we're not going to do that again. So really prioritizing time as the medium for us to build relationship. And some of that has been able to happen because we've had funding resources. So we're saying it's an anti-capitalist perspective, but because we had the privilege of having capital behind that time. So Gabriella had time through the mental health equity fellowship, her beginning year. I had time as I was onboarding into this position through our WPP grant, and Evelyn had time too on the Centro side to develop these relationships. So that's what I would add to that. Do you want to add anything?
I think from the community perspective, I think it's really honoring that we're working with people. I think that it's been an honor for me to work with Alyssa and Gabriella and others. I don't know what's wrong with my memory today, but everyone else. So so I really being able to work as people, because when you represent the academia, when you represent the community, sometimes that can be antagonistic in a way, because you hold different a differential of power, right? We have oftentimes different values because what academia holds dear is research and publication. And that's a currency that most people come to the community organization because they want to be able to expand on that. For community partners, what we hold dear is very different. We really are working in a community-based organizations because we are really trying to address the needs of the community and work with the community to understand what that is and be able to be that voice at systems also for that. So we have a lot of barriers to building trust and partnership because our communication is driven by different value systems, and our ability to work is also driven by funding, is driven by all of these other externalities that make it very difficult. So I think really being able to connect as human beings and be able to like really promote that sense of trust, and like Alyssa said, really working at the speed of trust. So, and oftentimes that requires that if we want to go far, to really, start very slow.
Quick question. How many students do you have in that cohort for next year? And then as a community organization, I want to have interest but I think that we need to do work before getting interest so we can actually have a better match. So what would be your kind of vision of like how to expand it to other organizations, and what do the other organizations?
That's a great question. So the question for the Zoom folks is, how many people do we have in our current cohort? How do we think about expanding the connection, particularly for clinically based practicum sites for that second year? That is a great question and continues to be some of the work that we need to develop. Our first inaugural cohort were 8 students across school, counseling, and rehabilitation psychology. Unfortunately, and this is also speaks to the system, this next year, so that was 2022, 2023, so we're graduating our first inaugural cohort this year. The next year, we did not have enough applicants to actually run the certificate. That speaks to a systemic issue of how recruitment happens to begin with for people coming into these programs. So we're still a very new certificate. I, at the time, was not taking advisees. We're a little bit beholden to how academics within these programs are taking advisees and doctoral and master's students to begin with. But we're trying to make the case and continuing to talk to them about this is actually a key point of recruitment, because a lot of the students in rehabilitation school and counseling psychology came to UW-Madison instead of going to Texas or Boston or California because we had this partnership, right? And so it is a huge strength, but we need to continue to grow that for our sustainability and for the mission that we have to do this. But we also want programs that are strong for these students as well. For the clinical side of these practicums, we are trying to be very flexible because we want to be able to include students across different types of programs who often have different expectations and processes for how they go into these different community sites. I think that's it can be a challenge, but it's mostly a strength because we have, for example, our school psychology students are working within schools. Like, what a gift to have these bilingual students working across different schools in the Madison, Dane County kind of area. But we also, because of that, we don't have as much oversight from the Esperanza side in what they're doing at these clinical practicum sites. So we're providing these courses are their kind of 1 credit supervision in Spanish and more as a reflective supervision versus like a clinically based supervision that they should be getting within their programs as well. So it's always kind of like an add-on. There's challenges to that, but I think overall the opportunity means that we are having more Spanish-speaking bilingual services being provided through these frameworks, and other people within the community are also learning from that as well. That also means a lot of potential for expansion. And so we're continuing to talk to these different program administrators and what our recruitment looks like and our processes look like, so we continue to streamline that workflow. But we just got this certificate approved in 2021 and we hit the ground running. So it's been a really fast growth. And so we're at the point right now that we're kind of like trying to slow down a bit more and be more intentional with our practice.
And I just want to add that the certificate is just one small part of it. So students are involved in many of the research projects, many of the podcasts and things like that. So that's really just a small part of all the things that we do. And so we continue to have a very lively team and very popular. And so some students can come in and sort of do a little bit of a la carte in terms of some of that training and services. Another question?
I have a question. Kind of about the community side of this. So I recently left University of Georgia, and I was working on a project where we did environmental education in really low income communities. And I had a interaction with some folks where they were like, you represent University of Georgia, right? How like you all represent University of Wisconsin. They're like, how dare you come here and not be talking to us about how to get into school or how to get our kids through school, because we had a lot of families who didn't have papers. And they were like, this is like, you speak Spanish, your advisor speaks Spanish, why are you here talking to us about environmental issues? We want you here talking to us about how to get into school. And obviously you are doing environmental issues, but I would imagine, especially given my knowledge of like Latine culture, people a lot of times, especially adults, are really focused on outcomes and not so much on like emotions and processing. And like, have you faced people who are like, why are you here to talk to us about our feelings? We just want our kids to go to school. We want them to make money and succeed. Like, how do you face that pushback, and what do you do about that?
We really take lead or direction from the community agencies. And so Evelyn's been very helpful in terms of helping us understand what the community needs and then being able to be responsive to that need. So the professional training and help that Danya is doing is really at the behest of the community. And after spending lots of time with them before coming in and sort of saying, this is what you need. Evelyn, do you have more things to say?
I have some.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
And I also think it's based on trust. And for example, at Centris Panel, we have multiple programs. So one parent that initially comes for a scholarship, because we have a scholarship program, that person wants their kid to succeed and to have the scholarship. They obtain the scholarship, but they also attend our after school programming. And there they talk about Esperanza. So it's like a cycle of, and then that the mom of that household goes to Zumba classes on Thursdays to our Mercadito. And then on Mercadito, we are there and we speak with the community. So it's like, oh, how are you? And let's go and buy nopales, and I'll share with you this recipe. So we know the community sees us at Centris Panel as part of them, not as academia. And then it's like, oh, and by the way, we have a podcast. Have you listened about it? But we don't are like, and we come from the UW. So it's like, it's not misleading, because at some point they will know where we're coming from and the partnership that we're having. But we have this initial trust with the parents, and it's a one-on-one issue. But I know the kid and I know the parent, and I asked about, I don't know if they had crashed recently, or, oh, I know their little sister comes to play and learn on Thursday, and I have their pictures. So it's a one-on-one trust-based community. So it's a true community, and it's not just mental health. They can access to education, and they can access the south part of Madison. Sometimes it's a food desert, so they can go to Mercadito, and they can also go to other programs that Centro has. So
Yeah, I would add to that, or just like, again, notice that Esperanza is part of so many other things that Centro Spano does. And because we're not just like this one-off partnership, we are literally integrated into Centro Spano, then we're not asking people to just come and talk about mental health. But if someone is kind of looking for scholarship resources or workforce development or even case management, one big challenge that we are continuously thinking about too are like mental health services. Like, we don't provide, as part of Esperanza, we do training, but we don't provide direct clinical services. Like, we don't have an Esperanza clinic, something we could think about in the future. And I would say the final thing that Gabriella was saying is like the mentoring. We all see each other, and I think that's the strength of our relationships as mentors to each other. I'm so, I learned so much in my job as a professional from the mentorship that I get from Evelyn and our community partners. And even from our students. And I think that's the piece of like liberation pedagogy, right? Like we're all learning together. We're a learning community together. And so centering those relationships, centering the community is really helpful, and feeling like we're not a one-off and we're not alone. We're out of time. I know there's one final question, and I hate leaving people without asking a question. So let's just do this one question super quick, but if people need to leave, please go.
My question, I think, is pretty quick. In regards to the sort of pipeline sustainability for the graduate program, are there things being done at the undergraduate level at University of Madison to sort of plant those seeds for the students that will be coming to the pipeline?
Definitely. So quick answer to what are we doing in the pipeline at UW? PASOS, so this peer mentoring program, Promotores Académicos Sembrando, Orientando y Sobresaliendo, that's exactly how Gabriella and I met. So when I was a graduate student at UW-Madison, a colleague of mine, Ivan Cabrera, and I founded this PASOS undergrad to graduate student Latina mentoring program. So we continue to do that. Now I'm a faculty advisor for that. These are all students who mentor undergraduate students. We want to grow our local community. And so we're also trying to be in touch with like even youth program folks and saying like, have you thought about going to UW-Madison? What if you go there for undergrad and then come to graduate school to Esperanza, right? Or even within Centro, like figuring out how do we grow the people that we know locally, who we know we will want to retain here to be psychologists, psychotherapists who are working for our community. And then the other thing for mentoring is our advanced students of Esperanza also teach an undergraduate Dimensions of Latino Mental Health Community Service Learning course. And so it's a partnership with Chicano Latino Studies program and Counseling Psychology. And that's another way that we get a lot of undergraduate students interested in counseling and getting into these programs. And we continue to mentor them through that application process.